Hey guys, welcome into the Corked Up Podcast Fantasy Edition Week 4. Holy shit, Frank. Fourth week already. We're cruising through this. I always forget how fast the beginning of the season tends to go. Like we're already, I guess it's not a fourth anymore because of that stupid 17th game.
Yep.
But I mean it's going fast. But we have some fantasy stuff to discuss. Not a whole lot this week. Frank, I actually just thought of one that I want to throw at you, and usually we prepare these questions in advance. So Frank is genuinely off guard. He has no idea what I'm about to ask him. After we get to our main topic, I want to keep this one locked and loaded because I want to get your thoughts on it. Let's go ahead and jump into what we wanted to discuss today, and that was, I wouldn't say necessarily a surprising turn of events when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts making Marlon Mack available. It sounds like he and the team both agreed that trading him was the best avenue. They have Jordan Wilkins as the running back 4, so they're not really going to miss out too much if there is some sort of injury. And Nyheim Hines, Frank, he
looks good.
That might be, if you're like looking for like an off-brand Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt situation, the Colts with JT and Hines might be that if the Colts start using Jonathan Taylor as much as they should. But so Frank, Marlon Mack, right? A guy that you were super high on last year, thought he'd be the RB1 with Jonathan Taylor kind of serving as that, running back 2 backup type role, and tears his Achilles week 1 and has been out and came back this year. I mean, is he still an effective player, Frank?
I mean, that we don't know because they haven't really used him. I would assume that teams are a little bit scared in terms of dishing out too much to get him in a trade because an Achilles is much harder to return from than like an ACL or a broken bone. But make no mistake, there are teams in this league that need running back help bad. And you're talking about a dude who was the workhorse there before Jonathan Taylor got there, right? So it's like this dude, we saw what he could do on a football field. I mean, the year before they drafted Jonathan Taylor, where did he have 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards? Like he was very productive.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of wanted to discuss some possible landing spots. I was looking not only for opportunity, but places that I thought fantasy-wise, would be the best fit for him to really get reps and help out a fantasy team, because he may even be on the waiver wire in certain leagues. Like, why would, like in a dynasty, sure, you keep him, he might get traded. In a 1-year league, why in the hell would before the trade rumor came out, like, why would he be on my roster?
Right.
Like, maybe if you have him week 1, you're like, all right, let's see what they're going to do with them. After I saw that, he would be gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's literally no value to having Marlon Mack on a 1-year fantasy league. But Frank and I wanted to kind of go through some teams. There haven't been a ton of rumors yet in terms of teams that may be interested in him. But so we just wanted to talk about, while there's more of a clean slate, teams that could really use him, and not only use him, but teams where he's going to come in and be valuable. And Frank, I'm just going to give you 2 right off the bat, and I'm curious to get your thoughts because I think the most obvious one would be the New York Jets. I think that is probably the most obvious answer for a guy like Marlon Mack, where there's really not a lot of running back production with the New York Jets right now. And there really isn't a lot of competition. He could easily just get traded, walk in day 1 and be their running back 1 and take over that backfield. But Frank, so I didn't want to talk too much about that because it kind of speaks for itself. But one that I thought would be interesting is the New England Patriots. Obviously, they just lost James White to, I believe it was a hip flexor. Damian Harris, I would say he's like the most traditional running back in the league right now. Like a guy who just gets rushing yards, doesn't really catch the ball in the backfield that much, and kind of scores like 1 touchdown every couple of games. Like that's about as traditional as it gets. So I think Marlon Mack could be a nice replacement for James White in that offense. I was curious what maybe some other teams you had, and then your thoughts on the Patriots getting him.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me if the Patriots got him. I mean, they love having 6 running backs and only using 2 every week. But I thought the most obvious fit for me and it's a team that's already stacked with veterans right now that is down bad in the running back room, is Tampa Bay. I mean, to me, that's an easy plug and play. You throw a fifth or a sixth 2 years from now, get your guy. He can immediately step right in and probably have an impact if he's anything like he was before the Achilles. I thought that one was sort of the shoe-in here. And it's almost like just like a Tom Brady thing. Of course, they need a running. It's like the time his team has a weakness, and then here comes a former RB1 that is just going to fall into their lap. Another one that I had that I thought could be a pretty obvious one as well is San Francisco. I mean, they're just they every week a running back is getting hurt.
Their main running back is a fullback right now.
Yeah, so it's like they can use as many. I mean, they need to, when they set every single year, when they set the 53-man roster, they need 15 running backs because they're all going to get hurt eventually, and they just need to have a revolving door for it. Yeah. I thought those two were the most obvious. I had the Jets on my list as well because for fantasy, you're right. I think he can step right in. No one has looked really good in that backfield. Yeah. My third one, outside of the Jets, because again, you took that one. It might be Atlanta. I don't think Mike Davis is performing like we thought he would. Like I know they've been behind, they haven't had chances to run the ball, but even when he does run the ball, I know the offense is sort of in shambles there, but he doesn't look like it's starting to make me think that maybe what happened in Carolina was a product of Matt Rule's system, and Chuba Hubbard will sort of continue to prove that right or wrong. If he just goes in and he does what Mike Davis did, you're like, okay, like what we kind of know the answer there. But I thought that was sort of like the dark horse team that could probably use a running back and get him for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I mean, if you gave three, then I guess I'm contractually obligated to give three myself. I don't know if I'd love the fit of this team, but with that being said, I think the Ravens probably could also make good use of him right now. That Tyson Williams, he kind of fell off a little bit. They signed Devonta Freeman. They signed Latavius Murray. They didn't trade for him, but they signed him. So I mean, and honestly, maybe a dark horse, like a very, very unlikely chance, but one that I think would also be interesting I guess there's a couple, Frank, now that I'm looking a little bit more. The Raiders, obviously with the injury to Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, man. I know you feel very strongly about him. The Chiefs, I mean, I'm not a big CEH fan, man, but a team like the Seahawks, honestly, like a guy, Chris, it's basically Chris Carson, and that's pretty much it in that backfield. So I think Marlon Mack, it depends what he has left in the tank. Like you said, we don't really know because he just hasn't played that much. They haven't needed him. Nyheim Hines has clearly established himself as the running back too there, the pass catching back. So
I mean, but if you're a team that needs a back at this point, I think he's the perfect option because you're going to get him for cheap. So if he winds up being himself again, you just got an RB1 for like a conditional sixth or fifth or whatever it's going to be. And if he winds up not being that good, it was worth the risk because you only gave up a fifth or a sixth. You know what I mean? Like you didn't give up much. So he's sort of the perfect trade candidate, I think, for teams that need one.
I think fantasy wise, if we're talking strictly fantasy, I would say, Patriots are up there just because they love those pass catching backs. The Chiefs, obviously, you're in the Chiefs offense. And then just strictly from the amount of usage he'd get is the Jets. It's just that offense doesn't score a lot of points, but I mean, just from the target volume alone, you're going to get a lot of points for that.
To be fair, though, we know they're not a good offense. And we're going to get into a not good offense in the regular podcast here, but the Jets have had a tough string of games in the first. I mean, they're playing insane defenses with a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach,
and a rookie play caller,
and a rookie running back. I mean, Michael Carter got drafted this year too, so it's like I know they haven't looked great, but they have been thrown to the gauntlet by the schedule makers. And everyone knows who's listening to this podcast, I'm not high on Zach Wilson. I don't think he's going to be very good. But if I'm a Jets fan, I'm not panicking. I'm like, he played the best of the best. Our schedule gets a little bit softer now. And I say all that to say, if Marlon Mack were to go there, that's a solid landing spot fantasy wise because they're not going to be
Yeah.
playing a good defense for a few weeks here.
Yeah. And just real quick, I got to make a quick apology. If you can hear my dog squeaking his toy, he picked the absolute worst one. So it's just going to get worse. But I'm just letting our listeners know. But Frank, I did have a question for you. We were planning on just talking Marlon Mack and then getting right into our starts and sits. But I do want to ask this one. You and I were talking a little bit about quarterback controversy. It's not a controversy, I don't think. I think when he's healthy, he'll play. But I gotta ask, man, if you're in a league where quarterback, you're thin at quarterback, is Jacoby Brissett worth taking a look at in this Dolphins offense? Because, man, when Tua was in there, he did not look very good. And I know it's different when you can't really game plan for a quarterback. How many times have we seen this where a quarterback, a backup, comes into the game, a short week or whatever it may be, comes in, performs well, and everyone's like, man, how is this guy not starting? And then they start playing a little bit more and teams start kind of, getting film, and then they kind of regress back to the backup quarterback role, and you're like, yeah. That's why Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback too. That's why.
Well, I'm out on Tua. I'm 100% out on it. So it depends on what the league is. If it's a one quarterback league and you're light, you're probably not going to win that league anyway. Like, a one QB 12 quarterback team, dude, you got to have a top 12 guy. But if it's like a super flex, 100% take a look at Jacoby, because I think, just seeing what they did last year with, once they did start Tua, Ryan Fitzpatrick was still finishing games like a closer in baseball, right? Like, I think it's pretty clear that this regime is going to, sort of favor a veteran guy. And it's because Tua just hasn't taken the job. Like, he hasn't looked good. He's looked really bad. Like, I know it's not been a national thing. Maybe it's just because it's the Dolphins. I don't get it, but he has not been good at all. Like, and it's like, it's not even like in spots. I've watched quite a few of their games. Like, whether it's highlights or full games if they're on TV. And it's like, he hasn't made like a wow throw. Like, man, that dude, like, his talent, like, and it probably has to do with the hip injury, because in college he had those throws.
Yeah. But
since being in the pros, man, it does not look good to me. So I would, at least for this year, look at Jacoby Brissett, because who knows what, if they wind up being really bad, they're going to draft the quarterback, I would think. But for this year, 100%. Are you in the same boat with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a point earlier in the year in our dynasty league where I had Tua on my roster, and there was a little miscommunication between Frank and myself when it came to this. There was a trade between, I send it to him. I'm like, man, I'd get Mac Jones and Jonnu Smith for Tua and Mike Gesicki, and Frank's like, you gotta do that, absolutely. I'm like sending it through, no doubts. And he goes, why do you have Mac Jones? And I thought you were making that trade. And I was like, I did make that trade. What do you mean? He's like, you fucked up. Like, because, we know what Mac Jones is going to be. And I think we saw that this past week against New Orleans. Like, Mac Jones is not a fantasy quarterback. He may win some games down the road with New England, whether it's playoff games, whatever. But fantasy-wise, Mac Jones is just nothing. And Tua is like, at least he's still kind of a question mark. Plus, they kind of loaded up a little bit on the offense, the wide receivers. But I watched a lot of what I watched last year was it really does look like that hip injury. I know they say he's clear, but there's still something there, Frank. Like he looks like he's just not stepping into throws very confidently, and I think that's really affecting that arm strength. It's like he can't make the throws he was making in college, where he was taking over for Jalen Hurts and winning a championship and things like that. Like, it's just not there right now.
Yeah, he has throws that like flail in the air.
Yeah,
like he legitimately, off the top of my head, he may have the worst arm strength in the league. Because we're not in a league where guys like, we don't have like Chad Penningtons anymore. Like, maybe Big Ben, since he's getting old, his arms getting a little shot. He didn't have that, that mustard on the throws anymore. He may be in that conversation, but Tua, you're young, dude. You're like 22 years old, man. Like, you got to get it together. Like, again, we'll have this conversation on regular pods about Justin Fields and things and sort of break things down that way. But he just like, I don't know, like even when early in Mitch's career, you're like, man, like he's got to get it together, but you can see the natural talent. I don't see that anymore out of Tua. Like he looks extremely, he looks very average at best.
Well, not even average.
But just the skill set, like the look of it is like you just look like a guy. Yeah, that's what you mean. Like he looks worse than that on the field, but just like seeing the throws, seeing that like some of these guys, like maybe even that aren't good, you're like you see why he's a pro though.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being harsh, but it's like Tua. It's like wow, like for a top 5. Unexpected. What was it, the 5th pick? Yeah,
it's trade up too. Traded up for him, I think.
Yep. Right? I believe so. I think you're right. Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our starts and sits because I have something that goes into this conversation. So, Frank, who are you starting at quarterback? Absolutely no doubt about it.
I'm going to give my start and my sit, and you can do the same for quarterback. My start is going to be a guy I know people get very frustrated with, but look, he's going up against a secondary that's really bad in the Seahawks. Give me Jimmy G this week. Slam the button, lock him in. He's going for 4 tutties. And my sit, we already kind of touched on him, is going to be Mac Jones. Listen here, I know the Buccaneers defense hasn't been that great, but Tom Brady's going back to break the record in New England. That team's showing up, and Mac Jones is going to get his ass kicked.
Yeah, I don't know how you start Mac Jones at this point at all. My start is a guy that I said start last week, and I'm going to continue to say it. Start Joe Burrow, man. Just keep fucking throwing him out there. He's playing Jacksonville on Thursday night. I mean, that could get ugly real quick, Frank. I mean, Joe Burrow, he's starting to kind of cross into that Russell Wilson territory where I was like, he's throwing like these deep balls. And, Jamar Chase is laying out there. He's making the catches. And I'm like, damn, Joe Burrow finally here. 3 touchdowns. And wait, he's got a $189 for yards. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. He's throwing the deep balls and everything. But then all of a sudden he ends the game with like 189 yards. I'm like, how does that work? But no, start Joe Burrow. He's definitely going to light up these Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm sitting, Frank, Carson Wentz. They're in Miami, and Carson Wentz, I don't know if you watched it all last week. He could not move an inch. I mean, he's got the double tape on the ankles. He's standing there. The guys are coming. He's like trying to throw. There was just nothing happening. So yeah, absolutely sitting Carson Wentz this week, Frank.
I was Googling really quick how old Carson Wentz is. He's 28. He may be the oldest 28-year-old I've ever seen with my 2 eyeballs.
He looked like Phil Rivers. That was the same offense I saw last year with this Indianapolis Colts.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. Well, all right, so
he's got the ankles, to be fair.
I get it, but he sprained both of his ankles on the same play, man. That's not.
That was Aaron Donald landing. What would you sprain? If Aaron Donald landed on you?
Broken. If Aaron Donald landed. All right,
give me your running backs. Yeah, give me your running backs.
Running backs really quick. I'm going, my must start is Kareem Hunt going against that Vikings D-line. That defense still isn't very good there in Minnesota, and the Browns love to run the ball. And honestly, you could start both of these guys. Like these are legitimate both RB1, RB2s in fantasy. So if you have them both on your team, start them both. They're going to eat. Like that's just what they do. My sit this week is Zeke. This Panthers defense is for real, man. They are nasty. I mean, they invested in the draft and it is paying off much earlier, I think, than anyone anticipated. And not for nothing, man. Tony Pollard is a better player than Zeke right now. He just looks explosive. So in my mind, the reason why he's my must sit is because in a tight game, in a crucial game, in a game where maybe you can't move the ball as much as you could in weeks past, I think they're going to defer to Pollard over Zeke in goal line situations and big time plays on third downs. Like he's going to be the guy. I think it's going to slowly move over to him in these types of games. So I'm sitting Zeke.
We saw that a little bit last year, you and I. We saw the Tony Pollard. What was that game against Arizona where he just took over that running back room, and it was like, man, I traded him for you sent him to me in Dynasty, and because I was like, Tony Pollard's he's kind of legit. He's kind of a legit running back. We'll see if he does start to get more of the load, if he can kind of keep up with taking a lot more hits, because he relatively doesn't get as many carries as he does. So that'll be something interesting to watch. Must start for me, Zach Moss against the Houston Texans. And I say this in the sense that if you have to choose between him and Devin Singletary, the Devin Singletary experience is over, frankly. Like, Zach Moss by far has taken over the starting job on that team. Devin Singletary, he didn't play that bad. They just like Zach Moss more for whatever reason. They just do. So start Zach Moss against the bad Texans team. And then for my sit, we were talking about him a little bit earlier today, Frank, when I was talking to you over the phone. Miles Sanders against the Kansas City Chiefs. And this has nothing to do with him as a player. But if you don't have other options, it's not a bad matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs because that defense isn't very good. But they just do not use Miles Sanders at all. It is the weirdest thing. He's clearly one of their better players on offense, but they just don't like to use him. So for that reason, if you have better options, go with someone else over Miles Sanders.
I think that's a good choice. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those reasons, and we'll get more into this in like off-season fantasy talks, philosophy talk, but it's a reason why I hate running backs.
Yeah.
Because stuff like this happens. Like, clearly talented players aren't getting enough touches, and it just leaves everybody frustrated. My start sit at wide receiver. My start, you touched on him a little bit earlier, Jamar Chase. I mean, this kid, he doesn't need 15 targets to be effective. Just throw it deep a few times, and he's going to chase it down. Going up against that.
Is that a pun?
It wasn't, but now it is. Going up against that Jacksonville secondary, who just isn't very good. And I'm hoping, I mean, the Bengals defense has looked solid, but in these types of games, you hope that the Jaguars can keep up offensively. That way, the Bengals don't just run the clock out and it's like 20-3 instead of like 31-28, and they had to keep passing the ball. My must sit, I'm going Robert Woods here. I think, I mean, he's still a very good player. Matthew Stafford has let it be known who his favorite receiver is on this team because Cooper Kupp right now through 3 weeks is the best receiver in football. I mean, this dude is balling out. I mean, there's not a route he can't run. You know, he's catching everything. We already knew he was a yak monster, but now he's getting like the targets and touched. I mean, yeah, it's if you have to start Woods, I guess, but everywhere that I have him after week 1, I've sat him. I'm like, okay, like. If Kupp gets hurt, maybe we're talking about something, but this is Kupp's team. You let him do his thing.
Yeah. Well, and Deshaun Jackson is starting to get involved in the offense a little bit more as well. So I like that a lot. Frank, you know why. I'm not going to go over it in the podcast because I'm going to get angry and it's just not going to turn into production. But it hurts my heart to see Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp be two of the best fantasy players around, and you know why, and some of our listeners will know why as well. It's just disappointing. But for me, must start wide receiver, back from the motherfucking dead, Frank. Brandon Ayuk, get him in your lineup. He's going to score touchdowns against the Seahawks team, Frank. You just talked about Jimmy G getting 4. All 4 are going to Brandon Ayuk. All right, man. All 4 of them. He's back from the dead. Debo, sit him down. All right, he's done. We've had enough of the Debo thing. All right, Brandon Ayuk back from the dead, get him in there, and then Frank sitting for me. Any Miami wide receiver, park him on the bench because, goddamn, there is just nothing there. They're gonna run the ball. Jacoby is gonna run the ball. They're just not gonna pass. Like, everyone was excited that Will Fuller was coming back. Not a whole lot there. I guess if you had to start Jalen Waddle, but I mean, Frank was out from Jalen Waddle to begin with. I mean, he's not a bad player. He just doesn't score touchdowns. And in fantasy, you really need guys who do that. I think he'll be a good player, but not right now. Just not.
I don't know if he can be. I mean, they need a quarterback.
Yeah.
Because he's not the type of guy. He's not like and this hasn't been true this year. He's not like an Allen Robinson where just throw him out there. He's big. He can, he's going to catch the 50-50 balls. Jalen is a small dude. And even to a point, like, could be really good in like gadget plays. You get him out in open space. You use his speed. I don't think he's a legit. I mean, in the same way I sort of felt about Jamar Chase. But as soon as he went to the Bengals, I was like, all right, this kid, that's perfect for him. I don't know if he'll ever be like the number 1, but you stretch the field, you give him those deep throws, like, he's going to do his thing.
Yeah.
But he would be Jalen Waddle in Miami, I think. Like, it's just not conducive to their skill set.
Frank, do you have any tight ends that you're going to be starting?
I mean, no. I hate it's week 4 and I'm just ready to dump every single one of them except for Travis Kelce.
I'll give you a name. I will give you a name. He's a guy that I picked up when I saw about the Irv Smith Jr. injury. Tyler Conklin of the Minnesota Vikings. He may be one of those guys who, if you get him, he can win you a game or two because he's going to get targets. He's going to score touchdowns. He's really the only option at tight end for the Vikings right now. Outside of that, there is just, I mean, your usual guys. Tyler Higbee he seems like he may be coming back. Frank, I know you have to be a little bit disappointed right now with George Kittle and his production.
Well, he got 17 points for me in the leagues that I had him in. He had a big play at the end of the game, so I was happy with it. But thus far, he has not been the tight end one that I thought he would be.
Yeah. Did you have any flexes, any special shout outs that you want to make right now?
If he is on the waiver wire for whatever reason, pick up Javonte Williams as soon as you can. I understand that. Why am I blanking on their starter?
Melvin Gordon.
That Melvin Gordon looks really good right now, but that kid is a hard run. He's going to take that job eventually this year. He just is. He's going to get more touches as the year goes on, and he's going to continue to prove himself. I don't know about this week. The Ravens are a solid defense, but you just pick him up.
Yeah, and for me, this is the last thing I'll say. Keep starting Mike Williams, Frank. Keep starting Mike Williams. Don't be afraid. Don't be like, he does this. No, man, this is different. This is a different Mike Williams. Justin Herbert elevated him to wide receiver 1 status. Keep playing him, man. Keep playing him until he stops. That's what I'll say.
But and before we get out of here, I saw a funny meme about that. Someone tweeted, they were like, the new offensive coordinator said he was going to be their Michael Thomas, and everyone laughed. And now look at us. He's the new Michael Thomas. And he just reeled off his stats for the first 3 weeks. It's insane.
Mike will. Now listen, is there maybe something to the fact that it's a contract year? I don't know. Maybe. But Allen Robinson's in a contract year, and he ain't doing shit. Jesus, Frankie, let's get out of here. We appreciate you guys listening to the fantasy edition of Corked Up Podcast. Head over to the main podcast for our thoughts on the Bears and the Browns if you want to, for some reason, listen to more about that, and then get our game picks for the rest of this week. We appreciate it. This is YouTube exclusive. We appreciate you guys watching and listening. Please like and subscribe. All that typical YouTube nonsense, Frank, is expected from people who watch this video. But we appreciate you. Frankie, talk to you next week, man.